Good morning, delegates. I hope you're all hale and hearty this morning. Very warm welcome back to the third day of our 90th Annual Conference. I hope you're all having a good gathering. Before we proceed with business, can I just quickly do all the housekeeping reminders? Please put your phones off as they cause some disturbance with people with hearing aids. Don't leave any paper or litter behind. Take it with you if you leave. If you wish to leave the hall at any point, please do so quickly and quietly. And also, we've had a few concerns about chatting in class. Some people are struggling to hear because people are having wee conversations. And I know folk are very excited to catch up with old friends, but just have a wee bit of sensitivity to those around you who are trying to listen to the speeches from the stadium. Now, we've got a wee addition to the agenda, and I'm going to invite Keith Brown, our Deputy Leader, to the podium because he's got a special announcement to make. Keith.
Good morning, Conference. You will be aware that we will not for a few hours have a President of the party after the resignation of Mike Russell. But we felt it was very important that one element of the President's duties to recognise the activities, the commitment of activists through the President's Prize should find its way onto the agenda, and that's what we're about to do just now. Can I say the recipients of the President's Prize today are people that I know very well. They have between them in their household over 100 years of commitment to the SNP. They have canvassed, they have delivered leaflets, they've written leaflets, they've proofread leaflets, they've gone to events, going right back into the 70s, in fact the 74 general election. As I say, I know these people very well. Many of you, I know the First Minister knows these people extremely well as well. And what I'd like you to do is to give the biggest possible thank you for 100 years of commitment to the cause when we bring these people to the stage. I did say yesterday when I spoke, no I didn't, I said it on Friday, that we get knocked down but we get back up again. There are two people that exemplify exactly that. We have seen tough times before in this party, in this movement, and it's due to people like this that we are in the situation that we are now in, ready to go forward to the final phase of independence. Conference, will you welcome to the stage Helen and Ian Graham?
Well, Conference, what a way to start the morning. 100 years of service. It's just truly remarkable and demonstrates beautifully the spirit and dedication of this party from top to bottom. So friends, moving ahead to the next item on our agenda, the SNP is proud to share a long history with our sister party, Plaid Cymru. Our parties have been relentless champions for the communities that we represent, for standing up against the deeply damaging Westminster austerity agenda, and as vocal advocates and campaigners for our nations to operate as normal, independent countries. And that common cause of a brighter future could not be in more stark contrast to the misery of the Westminster parties, who have no vision for a better future. And the case for independence is more urgent than ever, both in Scotland and for our friends in Wales. To hear more about that campaign, I am delighted to welcome to the stage from our sister party, Plaid Cymru, Luke Fletcher, MS. Warm welcome to Luke, please.
Diolch yn fawr, gyfeillion, friends, as you have before you a very happy Welshman. And I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to stand before you this morning, addressing this conference and bringing greetings from Wales. Thank you for your warm welcome this morning. It's been great to catch up with friends both old and new. I've had a true Scottish welcome, and a welcome I'll have a task in replicating for the next SNP representative who visits Plaid Cymru conference. I should also thank Stephen Flynn, your leader in Westminster, for coming to address our spring conference in Caernarfon. Let me assure you, the man in Aberdeen, he can deliver a speech. So no pressure on me to deliver an equally good one here today, I hope. Especially, of course, following last year's fraternal address, which was given by my party leader, Rhina Piorwerth. No doubt a better-known Plaid Cymru figure to many here. In fact, I imagine many of you are looking up here wondering who this bloke is. He hasn't even got a particularly Welsh-sounding name. Now, I'm proudly and unashamedly Plaid Cymru, but I'm not perhaps typically Plaid Cymru. Like so many in South Wales, my community in Pencoed has supported Labour for a century. My family is typically Labour. My dad held trade union meetings in our kitchen when I was growing up, and that was no doubt an experience that has shaped who I am today. But like so many in my community and my family, the length and breadth of Wales, in South Wales, we have been left with little to show for our support, shortchanged by Tory and Labour governments alike in London and in Cardiff. Mine is a community that has been let down time and time again by a Labour Party that always puts its own needs first and has been particularly poorly served by recent months of Welsh Labour infighting. Mine is a community that is crying out for the fairness and ambition that are the hallmarks of Plaid Cymru. I started the political journey that brings me to this stage today in Plaid Ifanc, campaigning alongside friends in Young Scots for independence and forging friendships that endure to this day. I was elected in 2021 at the age of 25, coming on 26. Now, I don't usually make much of my age, unless, of course, I want to tease my colleagues in the Plaid Cymru Senedd group. But I bring it up now because it is the people of my generation and younger who are driving the debate on independence. It's that youthful energy that animates and renews our movements, and we need it now more than ever. It is our young people that have been hurt most by the politics and economics of this so-called union. We support independence as a vehicle for delivering a different, better and fairer society. The kind of society that has been denied to us by the austerity, the lack of ambition, the plundering of resources and the concentration of power in the southeast of England that are baked into the very foundations of the British state. No matter the current flavour of its government or what colour tie its leaders wear, red or blue, the union will never work for Wales or for Scotland. It will always hold us back, make us poorer and limit the scope of our ambitions. Now, I think it's safe to say here that I'm no fan of Keir Starmer's politics. I suspect that might have been obvious already. After all, what is Starmerism other than abandoning all principle in the pursuit of power? What was it, the slogan of the Labour Party in the last election? Change. Change. A powerful slogan and one that clearly resonated right across this island. People voted for change. And I have to say, after 14 years of Tory rule, I even dared to hope the Starmer could deliver it for the sake of those communities like mine that need it the most. But what has Labour in government delivered so far? Rising energy bills, despite a promise that there was a costed plan ready to go to freeze them and bring them down. Maintenance of the two-child cap on benefits, keeping 1.6 million children in poverty, and kicking out of the party, by the way, those with principle, those who sought to include the scrapping of the cap in the King's speech. And of course, GB Energy and a so-called National Wealth Fund, new vehicles for the age-old practice of siphoning natural resources out of Wales and Scotland and selling off our services for private profit. And what's the latest? The October budget will be painful, they tell us. They have no choice but to inflict more cost-cutting on our communities. Well, so much for change. Starmer's broken promises are a slap in the face to all those who voted to give Labour the benefit of the doubt. For me and the area that I represent, this is no more painful of an example to point to than that is happening at the Tata-owned steelworks in Port Talbot. Port Talbot is a steel town. Its steelworks dominate the skyline in Swansea Bay, just as the castle and Arthur's Seat dominate this city. We're about to see, through direct job losses at the plant itself and further losses in the supply chain, the disappearance of 10,000 jobs, along with the capacity to create primary steel. No doubt a stark reminder of what communities like Motherwell faced here in Scotland. The UK is about to become the only country in the G7 that will be unable to produce primary steel. While I and my colleagues in Plaid Cymru were fighting alongside the community in Port Talbot to protect Welsh steel, we were told repeatedly by the Welsh Labour government to wait for the UK Labour government. They have a plan, they said. Well, today, we are none the wiser as to how Labour will save Welsh steel. We hear soundings that Tata won't budge after months of false hope and an insistence that things would be different with a Labour government on the other end of the M4. There was never a plan, only soundbites and tough words from Labour politicians who clamoured to be photographed holding signs of Save Our Welsh Steel. While Labour in Wales has sat on its hand, Plaid Cymru has been clear that we need to be bold and that we can and should take decisive action. We need to nationalise the site at Port Talbot, save the jobs and put the power back in the hands of the workers who have toiled and given their lives to the steel industry. So friends, that's Labour's record in government so far. Gyfeillion, I take no pleasure in saying this, but mark my words, if the last couple of months are anything to go by, this Labour government will be worse than the Tories. After all, they've told us as much, haven't they? Things are going to get worse. Labour have chosen, and it is a choice, to stick with the Osbornomics, to double down on a failed economic model which has slashed investment and hollowed out our communities. Austerity 2.0, bought, signed, sealed and delivered by and for the vested interests that are very happy with and profit from the status quo. And let's be in no doubt, there are those who will look to exploit, who are already exploiting the further hardships and suffering the Labour austerity will cause in our communities. The snake oil salesmen of the far right are looking to sow and deepen division. Conference, we cannot and will not let them. We will beat them by offering hope, a radical vision for real, ambitious and deliverable change. Over the next 18 months and building on our successes at this year's Westminster election, we'll be taking that vision to every doorstep in Wales. A Plaid Cymru Welsh Government will overturn 25 years of economic stagnation under Welsh Labour, delivering economic renewal through setting measurable and ambitious targets for an economy that prioritises decent work, sustainability and economic well-being. A new development agency for Wales will prioritise growing and supporting Welsh-owned businesses, underpinned by a new deal for small businesses on rates. A new funding settlement for our universities will help to drive innovation and a skills audit, and new supports for vocational training will see our young people equipped with the skills they need to secure high-paying, high-skilled jobs in the green economy. And above all, new supports for social enterprises, community-led ventures and cooperative businesses will build, retain and recycle wealth in our communities. Friends, in delivering all this and more, we'll be following an example you have set. SNP Scottish governments have led the way in showing that there is a different, more progressive path to follow. From the Scottish Child Payment to the community right to buy, the baby box to free personal and nursing care, we have and will learn from our sister party. We were proud to renew our productive working relationship following this year's general election, and as we look to the Scottish Parliament and Senate elections in 2026, we do so facing joint challenges and opportunities. We will continue to work together in Westminster and beyond to secure the fairer funding that Wales and Scotland are owed and our shared right to determine our own constitutional futures. We will continue to build our shared vision of Wales and Scotland as progressive, independent nations, claiming their place in European and global family of nations. Gyfeillion, diolch eto am y gwahoddiad I fod yma heddiw. Thanks again on behalf of all in my party for the invitation to be here today, for this opportunity to renew our bond of friendship and our shared determination to deliver the real, lasting change that people of Wales and Scotland need and deserve. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you ever so much, Luke, and we do indeed share the bonds of friendship, and we have deep bonds of a cause that we share to ensure that both the people of Scotland and the people of Wales are free to determine their own future. Once again, huge thank you to Luke for his words of wisdom and inspiration this morning. Colleagues, put your hands together again. Delegates, as we move forward to our third policy session, this policy session is with respect to international affairs. It will be led by the Cabinet Secretary Angus Robertson for External Affairs, and he will also be supported by Stephen Gethins, the Westminster spokesperson on Scotland and Europe. And we also have Cocab Stewart, the Scottish Government Equalities Minister, and we have Graham Day, the Minister for Higher and Further Education and also Veterans. So we will hear from everyone on the panel, and then we will run this session in a manner that we have done with the previous policy sessions. I have a long list of questions previously submitted by party members. I have them in front of me, and I will direct them through the chair. So without much further ado, I will ask Angus to speak, and then we'll hear from the rest of the panel. Angus, over to you.
Thank you very much, Convener. Good morning, delegates and observers to our conference, especially those from consulates and embassies of other countries. You're extremely welcome here at the SNP conference. And it's an honour to lead this session on international affairs as a Cabinet Secretary for External Affairs, but also prior to that as the long-standing Foreign Affairs, Defence and Security spokesman of the SNP. May I begin by addressing recent developments around diplomatic meetings held by the Scottish Government and the unhappiness felt by many about the meeting with the Israeli embassy, whilst the death and destruction is being meted out by Israel on the people of Gaza and indeed in the West Bank too. As I have already said, I am profoundly sorry that any impression was given of any normalisation with the Israeli government when in fact the priority of the Scottish Government was to communicate support for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the release of all hostages, an end to UK arms being sent to Israel, and the recognition of a sovereign Palestinian state within a two-state solution. Can I take the opportunity to thank members, especially from the BAME network and SAFI and other affiliates, who've reached out to discuss the issues involved, and I look forward to following up on how we can best keep our focus on holding Israel to account, supporting an end to the violence and a sustainable and peaceful future for Palestinians and for Israelis. Now, I know that we're all in agreement that the views of people in Scotland on international events like Gaza do matter, which is why we are united in our determination for Scotland to become a sovereign, independent country, taking its rightful place on the international stage as the 194th member of the United Nations. Scotland already contributes to global affairs wherever possible, but we are restricted within the United Kingdom. Our devolved Scottish Government has used its limited powers to address global poverty, the climate and biodiversity crisis, and threats to human rights. But without independence, Scotland has been forced into Brexit and compelled to host nuclear weapons against the will of people here. As an independent state, Scotland can develop a foreign and defence policy that meets our values, ensuring that our voice is heard on critical global issues such as the Israel-Gaza conflict and the war in Ukraine. And earlier this year, the Scottish Government published the Building a New Scotland paper entitled An Independent Scotland's Place in the World, which shows how Scotland can take its place on the international stage as the 194th member state of the United Nations. And as this paper makes clear, the SNP-led Scottish Government's vision for our country to join the global community of nations, including the European Union, as a full and equal member state. With independence for the first time in the modern era, Scotland can represent itself on the world stage. At a time when every nation faces immense global challenges from climate change to energy and security crises, Scotland must face those challenges through more, not less, cooperation with our fellow Europeans and the wider international community. In recent years, Brexit Britain has retreated from positive values-based foreign policies. But an independent Scotland would seek to be an open, an engaged and a positive international partner. An independent Scotland will be a good global citizen. With the full powers of independence, Scotland can build partnerships with other countries and international organisations to address global challenges, to promote human rights and development, to advance an ambitious progressive agenda, to secure agreements in international fora aligned with our values and our interests, and promote innovation, trade and investment. Specifically, the new Building a New Scotland paper proposes policies for Scotland to renew and strengthen its existing relationships on these islands, across Europe and around the world. And in advance of that, the Scottish Government works hard to develop the best relations with neighbouring and other nations, multilateral organisations and partners addressing challenges and opportunities. Let me give you one very concrete example, which is energy. As many of you will know, Europe's biggest economy is pivoting away from Russian gas to power its industry. Germany is moving as fast as possible to hydrogen, an energy source it itself cannot produce enough of. Scotland, on the other hand, will be able to produce so much renewable electricity in the decades ahead that we will be able to export hydrogen at scale. And what is true for Scotland, as a windy nation with considerable offshore potential, is also true for our immediate and northern neighbours. It's true for Ireland. It's true for Iceland, it's true for Faroes, it's true for Norway, it's true for Denmark. And that's why a significant focus of my work as Cabinet Secretary for External Affairs has been to work with the European Union, with German and other continental decision makers, to highlight the opportunities and with near neighbours about how we can coordinate our efforts towards interconnection and regional hydrogen development. We need to do this whether devolved or independent, and we're getting on with this right now. Another development which we're engaging with as never before is Scotland's diaspora. Not just with a network of Scottish Government offices, of trade and investment staff around the world, or over 1,200 global Scots, we're building links with our historic and our more contemporary diaspora. We value anyone who has, or wants to have, a connection with Scotland. The Scottish Government's definition of diaspora is therefore broad, and it is welcoming. And just as we consider Scots as being born here or not, who've lived here or not, who have paid us the compliment of choosing to live here or not, so do we consider our diaspora to be self-selecting and to be inclusive. And this includes a significant proportion of communities such as African Americans, Afro-Caribbeans, Native Americans, New Zealand Maoris, many of whom have Scottish heritage. Lastly, on Brand Scotland, the strategic partnership that does so much good work to promote Scotland at home and internationally. The award-winning partnership led by the Scottish Government brings together the key national organisations. This includes Scottish Development International, Visit Scotland, as well as Scottish Enterprise, Universities Scotland, Highlands and Islands Enterprise, Creative Scotland and Scotland's Food and Drink. All of us have the opportunity to promote Scotland here with family and friends internationally and through our diaspora. So if you haven't already done so, please visit Scotland's online shopfront. It's very easy to find. It's at www.scotland.org. Through that, you can register via the toolbox for excellent videos, fantastic promotional images and campaigns, and you can support and promote Scotland on social media. We can all play our part in promoting Brand Scotland. In conclusion, Business Convener, delegates, many thanks for your interests and support for Scotland's international relations. We all agree that Scotland's links to the rest of the world are profoundly important. It's not always going to be easy to get that exactly right, but we will do our best to stand up for our values and our priorities, just like all other countries in the international community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Angus. And can I invite Stephen to the podium, please? Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, conference friends. And I'd like to echo Angus's welcome to our visitors from around the world. You're so welcome to be here. A number of you will remember this in the hall, but when I first joined this party a long time ago, and in a hall and at a conference that was much smaller than this one, I was in Young Scots for Independence, and we used to sell a T-shirt that interspersed the Scottish National Party with an inter, the Scottish International Party. And for me, that's a message that resonated as much as it did all those decades ago. As it does now. And YSI, if you've got any more T-shirts like that, I shall gladly buy one, and I'm sure you'll have a willing audience here who'll buy a few as well. Internationalism and our place in the world goes to the very heart of this movement. It goes to the very heart why we exist, and it goes to the very heart of why we believe in independence for Scotland and regaining and reclaiming our place, not as any better or worse than any other country in the world, but simply as a normal and responsible member of the international community of nations. And on that, I'm also proud to be a member of a party that, by and large, have got the big calls right. We've got the big calls right in the climate emergency. I'm proud to be part of a group that has shown leadership from the very start on a ceasefire in the devastating conflict in Israel and Palestine. And I'm proud to be part of a group that's got it right, as this party has got it right, every single day when it's come to a relationship with the European Union. Because being no mistake, Brexit leaves us more isolated, it leaves us less secure, it has a massive impact on our public finances at a time when we're being told there is no alternative to austerity. There is an alternative to austerity. And when you have a Brexit that is costing us unnecessarily tens of billions of pounds, it's contributing to a cost of living crisis that makes us less fair and that makes us poorer. But there's one area that I think is pivotal. Every political generation should leave more opportunities and a better world for the young people who come after, for future generations than they themselves had. This is the first political generation, not for any wars or for anything that was outside of our control, but for a political decision endorsing a hard Brexit that leaves our future generations with fewer opportunities. That is a basic failing of politics and is a basic failing of Westminster to each and every person coming after us. And what I cannot fathom, and I'm in a different party, and I'm proud to be in a different party, I cannot fathom why the Labour Party would endorse a hard Tory Brexit that was never argued for during the Brexit referendum, and a hard Tory Brexit that even today refuses freedom of movement for under 30s, refuses the opportunity that I had, many in the hall had, and that many in that Westminster government had at the same time. It isn't right. Now, beyond Brexit, I want to talk about why our international policy is so important. It's important in terms of our soft power, the way we gain influence around the world. It's important commercially if we think about our food and drink sector, our whisky sector, our fantastic higher education sector. We've got our outstanding further and higher education minister here with us today. And at a time when you can put yourself in a place to seek to help with those conflicts that ravage the world. The conflict is, yes, in Israel and Palestine, the devastation in Ukraine, but also in Sudan with the millions who have been displaced in that country. In Yemen and Myanmar, I could go on. We live in a dangerous and less secure world. And that's why I've been proud of the work of this government. And last week, I joined up with the 1325 Fellows, a groundbreaking programme that's involved the United Nations, the Scottish Government and Beyond Borders Scotland that brings women peace builders from around the world. They were outstanding, and I was proud that they'd come to Scotland to share their stories with us. I'm also proud of the work that we've done on climate justice that is creating already the climate change that is devastating elsewhere in the world. I believe in this country because I believe in multilateralism and in the international rules-based system. Delegates, similar countries like us thrive. They create a better standard of living for their citizens, they are better international citizens, and they create a better life in something that we aspire to. So right now, that T-shirt I mentioned at the start is more relevant today than it was decades ago, and I'd urge conference that that's something that we continue to aspire to and we continue to put at the heart of our movement. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Stephen. That was certainly inspiring indeed. And you kept to time. That's amazing. And
I've been warned.
You've been warned. And can I now welcome CoCab Stewart, our Equalities Minister, to the stage to address delegates. CoCab.
Thanks, Angela. It's only going to go downhill from now on. I can say that. I can't follow Stephen, but I'm going to give it a good shot. I think, delegates, I would like to give you a wee overview of some of the work that I've been doing in my portfolio. But to kick us off, I just want to reiterate the fact that we stand in solidarity with Ukraine against Russia's illegal war on Ukraine. We continue to be proud to offer the Ukrainians sanctuary for as long as they need it. I've had the pleasure of going around the country during the recess and actually hearing from those who have opened their doors. And there are many that have done that. And what's actually happened is that in opening our doors, we've actually opened our hearts as well. And I've been hearing of the gratefulness. And I say to the Ukrainians, you don't need to be grateful. This is Scotland. This is who we are. This is what we do. We welcome people who need our support. And that is in stark contrast to a government that we have had before. And the one we have now, well, the jury's out. We're waiting with bated breath. Maybe we can give them some lessons and good practice that they can learn from here. So the New Scots delivery plan, it takes me nicely onto that. I was very proud to launch that. However, I want to pay tribute to the fact that there's been over a decade of work that has gone into crafting a sort of like embedded collaborative piece of work with COSLA, with the Scottish Refugee Council and with the Scottish Government. So I think that it's a brilliant example where people have come together as equal partners to make sure that all of us actually serve those that are seeking refuge and asylum in Scotland, to make sure that they feel at home from day one of arrival, which is a lot of hard work. It's a lot of services coming together, but once again, we are stepping up in that. There's no apology about the fact that it is ambitious. Some of those sort of like aims in it will take us time to deliver, but we can take our time and do it well. And we can do it with compassion, we can do it with humanity, and we can do it with dignity. I just want to, I have no idea if I'm going to keep to time or not, but I can't, I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes.
I'll remind you.
Also, I just want to mention the work that we have also done on our feminist approach to international relations. And I got stuck into that in my previous portfolio as Minister for Europe and International Development and Culture. That was promised in the 2021 programme for government. And since then, what we have done is that we have tried to make sure that our approach that we take here of fairness and inclusion, recognising the disproportionate impact that climate change, conflict, poverty, they have a very specific gendered impact on women across the globe. And whilst we rise, we must also make sure that as we climb, we also bring everybody else with us. And that includes women across the world. So, delegates, I'll bring my remarks to a close, but I will end on the fact that I recognise fully that Scotland is not without its problems. We absolutely recognise that we have issues that we need to work through and talk about, but we have been horrified by the scenes that we have seen that have not come as a surprise to many of us, including myself. I certainly lived through the 80s, where I saw the rise of the National Front and the British National Party, and it has been a very difficult time for members of all of our communities, especially ones that of our colour. And I have been proud of Scotland's response, that we are rejecting and continue to reject that hatred. And I will leave us on that note, that I know that every single person in this room will join us in standing in solidarity with all of our communities.
Thank you very much, Co-Cabinet. It was great to hear about the longevity of our commitment to welcoming refugees in Scotland. And it is with great pleasure, but last but not least, I would invite the Minister for Higher and Further Education and Veterans, Graham Day, to speak to us about his priorities and the work that he is pursuing, particularly in an international context. Graham, over to you.
Thanks, Angela, and good morning, Conference. The principal areas of international interest in the post-16 education space are essentially university-related, research cooperation, attracting international students, allowing our students and staff to re-engage with their peers after the loss of Erasmus, and taking our teaching offering out into the world. All of them incredibly important economically and reputationally for Scotland, and that's why we're working in active partnership with our higher education sector. On research cooperation and international engagement, the reputation of our institutions in the research space has helped mitigate the impact on relationships. And we are looking to build on that. For example, I'm meeting the German Research Foundation here in Edinburgh tomorrow in support of a programme involving our two nations. Developmental work on the bespoke Scottish scheme to plug the gaps in touring is the subject of close collaboration with university colleagues, and that continues. Ideally, we would all want to return to full participation in Erasmus, and that's a topic I hope to air with the UK Government when an opportunity arises. But in the meantime, we have been developing our own approach. The pilots that we ran last year are being formally assessed, but from what I've seen, they were overwhelmingly successful in reconnecting or making new connections. And despite the huge budgetary challenges facing us, it's important that we seek to build on that and bring the further education and wider youth sectors into the mix. But right now, our university's principal focus is on promotion of Scotland as the come-to destination for higher education, in order to mitigate the damaging impact of the actions and the anti-immigration rhetoric of the last UK government. So in a difficult financial situation, we'll have to balance spend between these two activities. We all, I think, understand the importance of international students to Scotland. Not only do they enhance our institutions and our communities, they, and we cannot duck this, bring much needed money into the system at a time when the public finances are extremely challenged. The anti-immigration stance of the last UK government, especially where it manifested itself in the form of restricting access to post-study visas, did enormous harm. We need to distance ourselves from that kind of rhetoric and actions and remind would-be international students both of the quality of the education they will receive in Scotland and the fact that this is a welcoming country. We want international students to come here, we want them to study here, and crucially, we want them to stay here. That's why we are weaving our universities and their offering into all of the international promotional work the government is undertaking. And then there is the transnational HE offering we have, whether that be in the form of physical footprint in other countries or online teaching. The efforts of our institutions in that area are hugely impressive. Conference, our perspective and that of our university should be and has to be international as well as national. My focus as the Higher and Further Education Minister, therefore, is as much outward as inward. Conference, thank you.
Thank you very much, Graham. And as I intimated earlier, delegates, I have a somewhat long list of questions that have been previously submitted for our panel today. And unsurprisingly, given that conference united around an emergency resolution on Friday, reiterating this party's long-standing and continuing support for the people of Palestine and how we move forward and how we can take additional actions to further that case and further the calls for an immediate ceasefire and end to the inhumane suffering of men, women and children in Gaza. So, unsurprisingly, there is a number of questions on that conflict. And in essence, from Michael Grigori and other delegates from around the country, can I pose to both Angus Robertson and Stephen Geffens the question, does the party agree with the ICC and its decision of Benjamin Netanyahu being a criminal, and what will the Scottish Government do to help the men, women and children suffering in Palestine? And who would like to go first? Stephen or Angus? Angus.
Happy to go first. So the first thing, I think the SNP has, as long as I've been a member, held up international law and the rules-based order as being absolutely key to the international community that we want to be a part of. And that involves international law, it involves the international courts, it involves international justice. And as many people in the room will be aware, the chief prosecutor of the ICC, who happens to have been born in Scotland, Karim Khan, issued arrest warrants both for a number of Israeli leaders, including the Prime Minister, and also for Hamas leaders at the same time. I think it's I think it's important that the international courts are able to do what they are supposed to do, and we have to support them in their work. So there's a responsibility for countries to deliver on the requests for warrants. The UK objected in the first instance to that. I think it has subsequently walked back from that. That's very welcome. At the same time, so that's what's happening with the ICC. There's also, at the same time, the International Court of Justice, and it issued an advisory ruling in July on the Israeli occupation that I know is at the forefront of people's minds, as well as the violence and being inflicted on the people of Gaza. And there's also the South African case that's been brought in relation to genocide. So all of these things really, really matter. And I think we need to do everything that we can and should do to support international justice delivering. So that's something, unfortunately, that we're not able to do directly because we're not an independent state yet. But will we call on the UK government, and no doubt Stephen and colleagues at Westminster will be making sure that the case is made, that we support the International Criminal Court, we support the International Court of Justice. They should be able to get on with what they are seeking to do, and they should be supported if they require arrest warrants to be acted on. And if people are found guilty of serious charges, including genocide, then it is justice that they should face.
Thank you. Stephen?
Thanks for that. That's a really good question. As I mentioned in my speech, and Angus has illustrated, this party that believes in the international rules-based system. That can be challenging sometimes, but I think that the rules of the International Criminal Court, and as Angus has said, highlighting the role of the International Court of Justice, are really important. I'd also urge that we need to have the same respect for international tribunals as we would for our own domestic tribunals, and that means that the rules around how we refer to those who have had allegations made against them and elsewhere be respected. We must give the court the space to be able to do its job, as Karim Khan has ably illustrated, and I wasn't aware until Angus mentioned that he'd been born in Scotland. I also think Angus was right to flag that the UK objections initially were wrong. And the first time I spoke in this Parliament, it was actually to flag the importance of the international rules-based system in a question to Keir Starmer in the week after the election. I think that my colleagues in the SNP group at Westminster, at Stephen Flynn and others, showed outstanding leadership on this issue, and that's something that we will continue to do. Angus is right that the UK has a wide range of responsibilities, and so we as a group will continue to make our voice heard, and in particular make our voice heard on the international rules-based system and some of the important work being done by these international tribunals who deserve our support and are carrying out their work in the most astonishingly difficult set of circumstances as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. COCAB, one of the things that you touched upon in your contribution is the impact that international events, and this is something that many members have picked up on, that the impact of atrocities elsewhere in the world, and of course we've heard a lot about our ongoing support and commitment to the people of Gaza, but many of our communities in Scotland are feeling particularly vulnerable because of events out with our shores, whether that's in Europe or indeed events closer to home. What do you think we should be doing in terms of our ongoing leadership and how we actively demonstrate that we are anti-racist, that we recognise the role of acts of omission as well as commission? So how do we avoid complacency in our country, and how do we give that support and security to our diverse communities here in Scotland?
I think you're right to mention complacency. There is that, and quite rightly, you know, we do have a different attitude up here, but we are not, with our sort of like flaws as well, and we must recognise that. Our community cohesion, and there's been amazing groups across the country and citizens that have worked really hard to make sure that we have our cohesive communities that we do have. However, that cohesion is fragile, and you're right to mention that sort of like, you know, global events can impinge on that. I represent Glasgow Kelvin. It's probably the most diverse constituency now in Scotland. And in response, I made sure that I was very visible and reached out immediately to our Muslim communities, to our Jewish communities, and they actually reached out to each other as well. So I think it's really important to make sure that not only do we reject racism, and we're very vociferous about it, we reject Islamophobia, and we reject anti-Semitism as well. And make sure that we are loud and proud in that rejection.
Thank you. So, again, I want to pick up on some further questions that we've received. There's particular interest amongst members around what difference can Scotland make on the world stage around equalities in international engagement. And of course, both CoCab and Stephen mentioned the measures like the Feminist Foreign Policy Strategy and support with Beyond Brothers on the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. So I'll start with Stephen on this occasion, and CoCab and others are welcome to come in as well.
So thank you, and thanks for that question. Look, with the normal powers of independence, you can do so much more, but actually Scotland is already delivering very significantly. Very significant soft power actor in the world. I've seen the work that Scottish NGOs have done in some of the most difficult and intractable conflicts around the world. I've seen the work of that in the Scottish Government. I also have to say, a long, long time ago, and I'm somebody who worked in areas affected by conflict and spent time living in the Caucasus, I was able to see the work that a long time ago Angus Robertson was doing in that area by bringing people together and talking to people about some of those really tricky conflicts. And even at that time, a long time ago, just being impressed by Scotland's power of convenership, but actually Angus's power of convenership on that as well. And right now, by providing leadership in areas such as the climate emergency, which has been really important, we've seen that consistently, by, I hope, providing some leadership at Westminster and pushing back on the received wisdom around the conflict in Israel-Palestine, also on issues like Brexit and our security, but also in implementing that feminist foreign policy, which in of itself is a leading measure and is aligning us with a large number of countries and is being looked on with interest. So I'm desperate for the day when we've got the full range of powers, but already the Scottish Government is, within the limited powers it's got, making a huge difference, and it's being noticed overseas. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other contributions? Oh, no, I'm just checking from Angus.
Well, just very briefly to add to that, I think people recognise internationally that Scotland has been taking a leading role when it comes to policy innovation. So whether that's on loss and damage, whether that's on feminist foreign policy, whether that's on peace and reconciliation, doing things that we have done, the hosting the first peace talks outside the former Soviet states for the South Caucasus is an example of Scotland can be a place where people can come. It's not that we have the answer to other people's problems per se, but by providing a safe space for people to come to be able to help their peace process, I think there's a lot more that we can do. I would just like to reiterate the point that I made in my address at the beginning. There's also a regional dimension to things. And I think for the first time, probably in hundreds of years, there's a growing sense of a northern neighbourhood which we share with all of our neighbouring countries to the west, the north and the east. It's not at the cost of the relationships that we hold and value to our friends in the rest of these islands or the European continent. But there's so much that unites us in our northern neighbours when it comes to energy, when it comes to security, when it comes to sharing best practice on things like education or rurality and Scotland has been one of the first adopters of that. So at the Arctic Assembly, Scotland is there every single year. And my favourite fact is that Scotland is the most northerly non-Arctic nation in the world, which really peeves the Estonians. Forgive, I don't know if there's any Estonians in the audience, sorry about that, but we're further north. Joking aside, it does actually matter what is our mental geography when it comes to the relationships that we have, and realising how close Ireland obviously is, but Iceland and Faroes and Norway and Denmark and so on. And there's much that we can do, and I think understanding the shared priorities that we share with countries who often in the past we've looked to because of their groundbreaking policies that they've had on social and economic policy, by bringing ourselves closer to their orbit, I think that will help infuse our public debate about how Scotland can be a better country. So I think being aware of the good work that's happening when it comes to different issues, but also understanding that we are playing the role within the limits that we have on regional development, such as northern cooperation in our near neighbourhood.
Thank you. Now, Graham. I've not been forgetting about you. You have spoken a lot in recent times about how higher education in Scotland attracts international students and the benefits and importance of that. But I also have some very direct questions, and this one's from John from Southside Central branch, and it's a direct question of, will the Scottish Government be setting up a replacement student exchange like Erasmus? It has been promised, but no real sign of it yet.
Okay, look, I understand the perspective that we are not as progressed in developing our Erasmus replacement scheme as many might want. However, in taking our time, we've been able to consider what touring does and doesn't do, and therefore we can provide additionality rather than duplication. We've also been able to look at the Welsh scheme as well. And as a direct result of that, whereas touring doesn't cover inbound activity, nor does it take account of staff as well as students, ours does. We ran 20 pilots last year. The assessment of the 20 pilots is going to be important, and I think we should assess it properly to decide how we take this forward. As is the voice of the university sector in all this, because as I said in my opening remarks, we are working very closely with them. Owing to time constraints, when we launched the pilot scheme, none of the colleges took part, which was unfortunate. I'm hoping to see them engage in the next round, which I think is now open for applications. If it wasn't, it is now.
We're very pleased to hear that. Thank you, Graham. A question for everyone on the panel, and again there was a huge amount of interest in the panel's views on the need to continuously articulate the social and economic benefit of Scotland's approach to welcoming refugees. How can we really learn from the work to welcome Ukrainians who have come to Scotland, some of them temporarily, but sadly some of them for living longer in Scotland, given the continued aggression of Russia and the ongoing war in Ukraine. I'll start with COCAB, but we'll work our way down the panel, because you specifically spoke of the new Scots strategy and launching our third version of the new Scots strategy. I launched the second one, and Hamza Yousaf did the first one.
There we go, in good company. Thanks, Angela. I think you talk about the social and economic benefit, but there's also the cultural benefit as well within that. I think what's different, I suppose, is that it's a holistic approach to supporting humans. So their talents, their interests, but also taking a trauma-informed approach. Because remember, people have left family members behind, so they need that support as part of that recovery as well, and making connections in a new land. I mean, it's a frightening thing to have left everything behind and then rebuild your life when you don't have the language. So I did speak to a young woman in Argyll and Bute, actually, and she'd done her degree in Ukraine. And over here, in the last year and a half, she has managed to take advantage of the ESOL provision. She was able to learn the language. She has now completed her postgraduate in teaching, and she just started working as a primary school teacher in the local primary school there. So it was an amazing achievement. There are 12 Ukrainian children. It's a joint campus. There's a primary school and a secondary school. And the added value there is amazing, because she's actually setting up Ukrainian lessons for the kids that want to learn Ukrainian. And then she's able to do the English lessons for the kids that want to learn that are Ukrainian. But also, I've spoken to families and women in particular who have had great talents in music, also cross-stitch, all these different sort of weaving, and they're actually reaching out into the communities, so that they're bringing people together in an intercultural way where it is actually an equal exchange. So we are able to share our rich, vibrant Scottish culture, and the Ukrainians are sharing their culture, a very proud nation, and they want to retain their own cultural heritage while they're here. However, they're fighting a losing battle with some of their Wains, who are now in our schools and are talking English in broad Scottish accents.
Thank you. Stephen?
So I always think it's worth getting a wee bit of perspective from history. We are a nation of migrants. Our economy, our society has been driven by migrants. There's not one of us in this hall that somewhere down the line, some more recent, some more distantly in the past, have a refugee or a migrant who has come here. And they've come here and they've enriched our society, they've enriched our economy, they've made Scotland a better place to live and work. And actually, I think that's really worth thinking about, because that's something that should inform our debate. And actually, when we saw the nature, and I'm sorry to say the nature of the debate in recent times in the way that we talk about migrants, we talk about the desperate people piling into rubber dinghies to cross the English Channel. Remembering that human side of it is really important. I'm really proud to be part of a party that has remembered that human side. And the way COCAB talks about it, that's important. How we talk about this issue counts. And I'm going to mention two last things. One of the members, I think a poet who's a member in Perth, Jim McIntosh, has just written a fantastic poetry anthology about the human circumstances of migration. And it really reminds us that this is a human story. This is about people. And we should do well always to remember that. And while I'm on books, Angus talked about the Northern Neighbourhood. Of course, you can read about that, the Northern Neighbourhood, in an excellent book, Scotland's Foreign Policy Footprint, by Professor Stephen Gethins, which I'm sure is still available in all good bookshops.
Yeah, very good read.
Utterly shameless. Angus.
So no shameless book plugs here.
No more book plugs,
Def-
Angus.
definitely
Absolutely not.
Definitely not. So, all joking aside, I mean, I feel quite struck by this debate. My mother was a refugee and came to these shores because of the Second World War, and grew up, frankly, very traumatized by her childhood experiences. I grew up in that. My first language isn't English. My first language is German. I speak German with my children. And so this discussion we're having about recognizing the circumstances in which people come here, the fact that it's not always easy, the fact that people are often trying to hold on to something from a country they left, a country that might not actually exist in the same way as it did when they lived there or left, is something that resonates very strongly with me. So when I hear what COCAB was saying, for example, about Ukrainians who have come here, I just think that, all praise to her, to Neil Gray, who also fronted up the Scottish Government's efforts in offering a warm welcome to Ukrainians who are here. The conversations I've had with Ukrainians who've come here, they love Scotland. And they love the fact that they have a place in Scotland, and I love the fact that they feel that way. And it makes me proud of my country that they and others from other countries and other circumstances, often extremely testing, have come here and have made their home here. And it leads me to think of another thing, and I'm going to hand back the mic in a second. I could talk forever about this. When we're talking about diaspora, a thing that we've kind of taken for granted, people who left centuries ago, We're losing the fact that the diaspora is actually an emerging and a changing thing. And these people form part of Scotland's diaspora. It's not just a one-way, those that left, it's also the people who came and their relationship, an ongoing relationship that they have with the country that they have come from. And I think that behoves us to think a little bit more and differently about how do we make more of that. For Poles, for example, think of all the tens of thousands of Poles who've come to Scotland and still have connections in Poland. What are we doing with that? We're trying to do more with that, is the answer. So I think thinking about all of this in the round, the fact that this goes back to the T-shirt, and it's much more than the T-shirt. We are Scotland's international party. We are hardwired into that thinking. And I'm really proud of what the Scottish Government does to make sure that people who come here, regardless of where they come from, are welcome. And we need to do everything that we can to keep all of that going.
Graham.
One of the things we can do for these folks is to help get them into work. Not only is that the right thing to do for them, it helps our economy, and we have skill shortages in Scotland. I met a group of Ukrainian men in Dundee last year, and I was horrified to discover that in amongst all the great support we provided them, no one had thought to do a skills audit. And that group included an aerospace engineer and a guy who'd been in charge of refueling the aircraft at one of the major airports in his homeland. They were all bursting to work. Now, there are challenges around some of this, getting the read across between qualifications right. When you've fled your homeland, you don't think to take your qualification certificates with you, and you know the buildings that contained this information are perhaps gone now. But it's not beyond the wit of men to come up with a solution to this, and I think that has to be a priority for us, because it's the right thing to do for these folks, but it's also what we need to do for our own benefit.
Graham. Are you therefore involved in the work to push for a visa pilot in terms of the representations that are made to the UK government, or is that as much a cross-portfolio endeavour between equalities, international and education?
Yeah, I mean, we're supporting that, but it is another portfolio that leads on this. But I mean, as well as looking at that, we need to be absolutely sure that as a country, as Scotland, we're doing as much as we possibly can in the meantime to provide the support for these individuals.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much to delegates. Angus, can I invite you to sum up and give your thanks to the panel and the audience?
Well, just very briefly to say, I think the fact that so many people are here on a Sunday morning after the Saturday night before is a sign that for SNP members, Scotland and the world, Scotland and the international community really matters. I think a second observation is the fact that we have colleagues right across government and across parliaments who do this work day and daily is a sign how we take all of these things as seriously as we do. What I would want to reflect back to members in the hall, though, is there's a great many of you who have real experience in different countries, in different issues, in different regions. And I know colleagues in the Westminster Group and other ministerial colleagues would be delighted if members, if branches of constituency parties would wish to pass on things that you think we should be doing more of, less of, differently. We are massively open to all of that. We try and get it right. Won't manage it all of the time, but we are trying our best. So thank you very much for your interest in Scotland and the world. It's a reason why many of us joined the SNP in the first place. And with that, I'll hand back the microphone. So thank you to you all, and thank you to my colleagues in the top table. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our panel. We are now moving on to the next session of our morning business, and we've got a number of resolutions to deal with. So if you can just bear with us a wee moment while we change some of the furniture around a wee bit. Colleagues, I thought it might be useful in advance of this afternoon's session if we put on the screens the topicals that will be taken this afternoon. They won't be taken this morning, but they'll be taken this afternoon, and it's just to give some advance warning so people can familiarise themselves with the text, and you'll see that there'll be a topical discussed later on with respect to winter fuel payments. Right. Okay, friends, we're moving on to Resolution 10, Housing as a Common Good. And can I invite Chris Hanlon to propose the resolution? And if Chris, if you can make your way to the stage, please. Thank you very much. You've got 5 minutes.
Morning, Conference. This is one of those rarest of beasts at SNP Conference. A resolution that was previously remitted back that is being represented with amendments based on the feedback from the people that voted for that remit back. Now, I hope it won't meet the same fate today that it met a year ago at National Council, and I would like to thank all those that have helped improve it in that time. I'm not claiming that it was perfect then or that it is perfect now. What it should do now is offer sufficient latitude to those that must implement it that it can be implemented and implemented quickly. It's unfortunate that it didn't become party policy last year when it might have had an impact on the policy platform that Scottish voters were judging us on in the general election. But I believe this improved version can have a significant impact on the proposition we will be offering to the people of Scotland for the Holyrood election in 2026. I believe it is precisely the sort of bold, ambitious, mission-driven proposal that by offering to do something tangible for voters will inspire them to give us a mandate to govern at that election. I've seen many of you at various fringe meetings over the course of this weekend. On Thursday, when we heard how homelessness impacts the life prospects of the thousands of families that are forced into it every year through no fault of their own, and the burden that the lack of suitable housing to accommodate them places on the resources of already overstretched councils. Yesterday lunchtime, when we heard from the Deputy First Minister how communities, unable to acquire land because it is being hoarded by others in a manner that has been depopulating rural Scotland for centuries, struggle to survive, let alone adapt and thrive in a changing economic environment. Or yesterday evening, when a non-partisan representative of a body representing businesses doing short-term lets suggested that many of the social problems associated with short-term lets were in reality symptoms of a much larger problem, a lack of social housing that has reached catastrophic proportions. I'd like to thank the Minister for Housing, Paul McLennan, who has been at all those fringe meetings and has been kind enough to spend significant time talking to me about this resolution and to offer to work together in a collegiate manner on these issues going forward, an offer I intend to grab with both hands. I won't address the amendment here, which I'm certain is based on some misapprehension of the intent of the resolution, so I'll address whatever points they make in my summing up once I've heard what they are. This resolution is intended to do two things: to put a decisive end to the housing crisis in Scotland, to act as a proof of concept for the more creative and ambitious attitudes we have agreed to take towards taxation in Scotland. Both my resolution on funding the Just Transition on Friday and the TUG's one yesterday on adopting the approach recommended by the STUC rely heavily on creative use of the tax powers that Holyrood already possesses but hasn't made full use of yet. The resolution is intended to give our colleagues in the Scottish Government the tools they need to end the housing crisis, to break the stranglehold Westminster has on Holyrood's finances, and to give them the latitude to do so regardless of any practical obstacles they might encounter in implementing the policy. Simply put, it will enable an existing policy that was developed under the leadership of Shona Robertson and Neil Gray on the Social Justice and Fairness Commission to create a national housing land corporation, owned by local authorities, that would be empowered to do the special work of acquiring land and to pass it on at cost to councils, housing associations and community-owned initiatives to increase our social housing stock by hook or by crook. If it's cheaper to acquire and refurbish derelict or unoccupied properties than to build new, then that's what we should do where we can. And when building new makes sense, we should build the highest quality, future-proofed homes that make financial sense. And that should be funded by mandating councils to raise a simple land use tax that levies a small, nominal charge on larger holdings, those greater than an acre, that are not exclusively used for agriculture or crofting. I would suggest a couple of quid a month per acre initially as we're setting things up. This might raise £100 million annually and be enough to acquire sufficient land to build in excess of 20,000 homes for social rent every year. To end, I want to point out that the first paragraph of this resolution mentions the Citizens' Assembly on reforming council tax that we had as a manifesto commitment and that it was always intended to hold next year. I know Tom Arthur has been working on this for some time, and I am painfully aware that what appear to be extraneous expenses are on the chopping block right now, and I want to highlight that that proposal that was in our manifesto is not optional. It's something that we must do. It's been 17 years since we first came into government promising to reform council tax. We must do so. It must be in our manifesto for the next election, and we can only do it with the permission of the people of Scotland, and that's through using a Citizens' Assembly. Thank you very much.
Can I invite David Hood to second the resolution? David's also from West Fife and Coastal Villages and is the convener of that branch. And if I can intimate that in terms of the amendment, if Susan Thompson can be close to the stage. Over to you, David. You've got 3 minutes.
It's always great to follow up from Chris. Yes, the common good is something that was new to me, and investigating it further, I looked into this and I just thought it was a phrase, but it's reflected in the land and the ownership of the assets and protecting and curating those assets. And indeed, I think that it's got a wider issue with, with human rights, with the erosion of that common good and public ownership for decades. And this has happened more often than not these days, and undermines our Scottish Constitution. And Chris has tied this ably in with the start of a comprehensive reflection on the use of land and land tax, and that it must be aligned with housing. So I'd just like to second the resolution, another great resolution from Chris and our branch, and please support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And can I call Susan Thompson to speak to the amendment, please? Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Conference. We support the sentiments of the resolution. However, we don't believe that it's island-proofed as it stands, so that's why I'm here this morning. Scotland's land ownership is hugely concentrated. A small number of landowners own huge swathes of our land. Research by the Hutton Institute recently identified over 1,000 land holdings who had over 1,000 hectares, and that represented 55% of Scotland. Surely this represents a greater challenge to the availability of land than someone who owns an acre and a half. And as such, this must be addressed as a priority, not the small landowners or people who are fortunate enough to have a couple of crofts. It's generally accepted that, in no small part due to the quality of much of the croft land where I live in the Western Isles, that it cannot support crofters and their families. Most crofters have jobs outside of the croft. Otherwise, it's just not a viable life. And part of that is also diversification on the croft. and they rely on that extra income that comes from that diversification. So, as I said, we hugely support the sentiment of the resolution. We just felt that it needed a wee bit of island proofing, and I hope that that's what we've done with our amendment, and I would ask you to support the amendment and the resolution as amended. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. And can I ask Joshua Cockhill from Paisley Tanner Hill, who is going to second the amendment, please? Warm welcome to Joshua.
Good morning, Conference. You must forgive me. This is my first time at Conference. This is my first time speaking at Conference. And I wish to express what a joy it is to be with you here this morning. Friends, I welcome Resolution 10. I second the amendment simply on the technical reason that diversification has been omitted from the resolution that my friend Susie Thompson has gone over. But I also wish to dwell on something that David Hood alluded to as well, because I believe that this goes some of the way in restoring our duchas. Now, this is the idea of mutual accountability and responsibility between landowners, those living on the land, and the land itself. Duchas once saw the landowners recognize that they had a duty of care for those who lived on their land, not just because of what service they could do for him, but because of their heritage and connection with the land. They belonged to the land, just as much as the land belonged to them. And this idea of loyalty to one's land and community became so strong that once upon a time it threatened the government so much that they dismantled the entire system and empowered the landowners to betray that duty, to betray that duchas in the clearances of both the highlands and the lowlands. They made a desert and called it peace. And we still see the ripple effects of that betrayal today with ongoing depopulation, economic disparity, and over half of all rural Scotland still in the hands of just over 400 landowners. The term land value tax is a misnomer. It's not really a tax. It is a return to the public of the benefits that the landlords have taken by the natural appreciation of their property's value. When land rises in value, those who happen to own it at the time reap the benefits thereof without necessarily having to do anything. Now, I am not against landlords. I am hugely in favour of land ownership, and I would dearly love to see many more people own the four walls that they call their home. But the balance is wrong. The balance is off, and this resolution begins to take the first steps in addressing that, in restoring our duchas, so that we can finally say again that our resources, our future, our land, the land of the Scots, belongs not to the few, but to the many. Conference, I commend this amendment and this resolution to you today.
Well done, Joshua, and being a first-time conference speaker, although I suspect it's not your first time addressing an audience, but very well done indeed. Now, we have a proposer and seconder for the remit back. Can I invite Annette Smart onto the stage? Annette is from the Hoyk branch. Is Annette here? Oh, here she is. Thank you. You're welcome.
Good morning, Conference. That's a tough act to follow there. It's also my first time at speaking at Conference. As mentioned, my name's Annette Smart, and I'm an SNP councillor in the Scottish Borders. Yes, there are a few of us. I've come up today to propose a remit back for Resolution 10. I didn't realise that it had already been done before, so apologies for that. Before I get into the detail of why I wish to do so, I would like to say that I fully support land and local tax reform in Scotland and the need for more housing. But unfortunately, I don't believe the concepts in Resolution 10 are able to address these issues as it stands. My reasons for saying so are based on my previous experience. Prior to being elected in 2022, I was one of the members of Scotland's Citizens' Assembly for Climate Change, and housing, land reform and tax were debated in depth and informed many of the goals that we presented in our Assembly report to the Scottish Government. As a councillor, I am one of the consultees when our local housing strategy is produced. My personal remit is as opposition spokesperson for infrastructure and environment, which covers housing and sustainability. Resolution 10 proposes a new supplementary land tax for Scotland. However, I do not believe this is possible within Scottish Government devolved powers. When the Citizens' Assembly proposed a carbon land tax for Scotland, in reply to this recommendation, the Scottish Government informed us that it was unable to implement a new national devolved tax. Consent would have been and will be required from the UK Government, and I think we all know how that works out. However, contained within Motion 4, which we passed yesterday, is the proposal to grant local authorities the power and discretion to introduce taxes which appropriately meet local needs and protect local services. Therefore, instead of imposing Resolution 10 on councils and councillors, those powers could be used by local authorities to introduce new land, carbon and housing tax as appropriate. The Scottish Government does have the devolved power to grant this, therefore neatly sidestepping the need for a new national Scottish tax. Therefore, I don't think it would be probable to set up a housing land corporation. And if I'm brutally honest, such an organisation being owned by all local authorities in Scotland, I do not believe is a workable idea. I can already hear the bickering. When it comes to housing policy, each local authority has a statutory obligation to produce a strategy every 5 years. Scottish Borders Council produced one in November last year, and this runs until 2028. Many of the points in Resolution 10 will be covered by the local authority housing strategies, and each local authority will have gone through the process of consultation with communities and stakeholders before their strategy is passed. Local strategies for local people. The Land Reform Bill currently going through the Scottish Parliament will be able to address many of the other points raised in Resolution 10, especially if ideas are put forward for amendments to the bill as it makes progress, and that's on you, delegates. In conclusion, I ask Conference to support the remit back so this resolution can be revisited with those points in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Annette. Another excellent first-time speaker. Now, Faye Sinclair, you propose to second the remit back, and over to you, Faye.
Thank you, and thank you, Conference. And like Annette, I just want to say that I wholeheartedly support the aims of this resolution. My concern is basically the length of it. This is a 2-page long resolution. I think we need to be much more focused and directed in what we're doing. And I think a lot of what's mentioned here is already happening in local authorities. We are working very hard to ensure our housing is fit for the future. As Councillor Smart mentioned, local taxation is a big part of that, and we've already agreed those steps just yesterday at this conference. I wanted to pull out just a couple of parts from the resolution, which is why I think it needs to go back to maybe have another think, and certainly to condense and focus it. I'm concerned on the line that we want to create a range of standardised plans, because I know that our communities are not standard. They are vast, they are different, and we need bespoke solutions in each community that really meets the needs of that specific community, not necessarily a standardised plan that you can take off the shelf. And another area that I think actually would make a resolution on its own is the line that we should ensure that rural communities are revived and centuries of depopulation reversed as a priority. Absolutely agree with this. I think it's worthy of more than a single line. under housing, because I think there's a much bigger picture there. It's not just housing, although that's a massive part of it. We are seeing young people from the borders leaving for education and not returning. We're seeing people leaving for jobs and not returning. It needs jobs, it needs education, it needs opportunities, and it needs housing. So I would like to see a couple of these points maybe refined, possibly even standing on their own, and that's why I'm asking for the remit back. So please support. Thank you.
Thank you, Faye. Thank you, Faye. And can I now invite Graham McCormick onto the stage from the Helensburgh branch? Graham wishes to move the direct negative. And just a wee reminder to switch phones off. I can hear somebody's phone's ringing. Graham, over to you.
Thank you, Angela. First of all, could I pay tribute to Chris and the other speakers and what they have been saying and the amount of effort and thought that they have put into it. The problem is that we've been speaking a lot for an awful long time about land reform. And we've had it at a number of events, both in the conference hall and at fringe meetings this weekend. But really it is time for action. As I said, I think at the last or the second, or two years ago or a year ago, you know, the current land reform bill, I attended the Royal Highland Show, and there was a meeting there, and Andy Whiteman spoke about the changes, the proposed changes to the allowance or allowing big landowners to sell their properties. And he contributed. And there was a contribution from I think the Chief Executive of Scottish Land Estates. And basically, when their opinion is, in my words, a word beginning with K and ending with ich, you will appreciate that it really won't do anything for us. Because the position here is that not one person living today will see the day when 50% of Scotland's land belongs to 50% of the people. And I think that is a dreadful, dreadful position when we are in power and we can do something about it. Now, it has already been said the Scottish Government does not have the power to introduce a national tax on land or a rent on land. That is wrong. That is legally wrong. And to force the point, I would suggest that Kate Forbes and Shona Robertson and the rest of the people that peddle that myth actually speak to Martin Davidson. Now, Martin Davidson is the senior civil servant who is head of the Scottish Government New Tax and Environment Unit. And I have had an exchange of emails with him when he has admitted that the Scottish Government does have the power to introduce certain national taxes without the consent of the UK Government. So let's have no more nonsense. Let's have no more trying to get around this. Let's have some action, because we have the power. We have actually the infrastructure in place. We have Revenue Scotland, we have the General Register of Cessions, we have the Land Register, we have the cadastral plan. Everything is in place except for the legislation, and we could do it quickly so that we could transform lives, that the land is available. And I know, having spoken to representatives of big landowners, that, you know, when it becomes a burden to them every year of paying a rent for the land that they own, unless they can make money on that every year, they will give it up, because it doesn't form part of their actual business plan. So instead of thinking of paying landowners to release land for public good and all the rest of it, a lot of them will give them up. And don't forget that 60%, according to the Land Commission, 60% of dilapidated and vacant land in urban Scotland is already owned by the public sector. And that's been the case for generations. So we have the land, it's just there's not a political will to do something about it. So if this government and this party, you know, introduced rent on land, whether it's publicly owned or privately owned, because of the threat of a burden of having to pay an annual rent on it, they will soon do something with it, or alternatively give it up, and that's what we need. So basically, reject this motion, not because the you know, the sentiments are so right in it. But the fact is we have that power, have the confidence to do it, because it's land that will bring us independence. It's land that will bring us independence. It will get our people out of poverty. It will provide the homes. The guy from Barrett, the CEO from Barrett in England, said of the English government, and I use that purposely, not the UK government, the English government, he said that if they were allowed to, they could provide 200,000 houses a year to help the housing emergency down south. Well, by God, we could do that. Get a hold of him, get a hold of the CEO of Springfield in Scotland, and let's get it done. There is no excuse. Let's get it done, and I will tell you, if we do it now, we will not only be returned as the government of Scotland in 2026, but it will propel us to independence.
Thank you, Graham. Can I ask Susan Aitken to make her way to the podium to speak for the resolution? Susan will be the last speaker in this part of the debate, and then we will move to summing up. I would gently remind conference that we still have 2 other resolutions to try and attend to. Time is short. If people wish to forgo their right to sum up, I just ask you to consider that while Susan is speaking. A warm welcome to Susan Aitken, please.
Good morning, Conference. I am very proud to be the leader of Glasgow, Europe's preeminent post-industrial city, and also a city that sits at the heart of the Clyde Corridor, which is probably Europe's biggest unrealised development opportunity. There's a reason why it is unrealised, and that is because of the land and the condition of the land and the ownership of the land in that Clyde Corridor. Glasgow also has more vacant and derelict land than any other local authority in the UK. Urban vacant and derelict land, most of it is post-industrial. Now, over the years, we have been, particularly over the past 7 years, since the SNP took administration in Glasgow for the first time, we have been steadily reducing the amount of that vacant and derelict land and that urban blight, and using it for housing, for new industry, for new public services, for entire new communities in some cases. But a lot of the low-hanging fruit is gone, and a lot of what is left, firstly, needs to be remediated in ways that are very, very expensive. It might be contaminated by industrial chemicals. It may be literally undermined. It may have a significant flood risk because of its location near the River Clyde. And so it needs a very significant amount of investment, literally to go under the ground before anything can be built on it. And secondly, the ownership of that land is highly fragmented and often opaque. Often you will go back through and find that it might sit in the portfolio of some hedge fund somewhere, and it doesn't care. That hedge fund doesn't care that it's causing urban blight in the communities of the Glasgow metropolitan region. It's sitting there as a tax write-off for them. But the opportunity that is presented, if we were able to get the control of that land and to get the benefit of the huge amounts of public investment that have gone in to remediate post-industrial land in Glasgow and across West Central Scotland, are absolutely phenomenal. It is an enormous challenge, but the opportunities that we gain from that challenge for economic growth, for fantastic new housing, for new jobs, for new infrastructure, is one that we absolutely have to grasp. I believe that the core of this resolution gives us a way forward to do that. I have some sympathy with the movers of the remit back. There is a lot of detail there that maybe isn't necessary, that's a bit extraneous, but I think that the core of having a national approach to getting control of land in both rural and urban areas, grasping the opportunity and grasping the value of it for us and our communities in Scotland is something that's incredibly important, and I hope that you'll support it, Conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. Now, can I check with Susan Thompson whether you wish to come back on stage or not, Susan, to wind up? Okay, thank you very much, Susan. And in terms of Annette and summing up for the remit back, is there anything further you would like to add, Annette? No, okay, thank you, Annette. And Graham, in terms of the direct negative, is there anything you would like to add in terms of summing up as he does the 50-metre sprint? Maybe appeal to speakers, to particularly proposers and seconders, etc., to be a wee bit nearer the front. Thank you, Graham.
That's me, had my exercise for today. Anyway, the one thing I'd like to say, and I accept a lot of what Susan was saying there. The point is that if we impose a tax, these people like the hedge funds, these people, you know, or these companies, you know, which are in the Grand Caymans and God knows where else, if we put the responsibility on them to register for the tax and they fail not to register, it doesn't matter where they are. The power would be contained in the legislation whereby if they didn't register and pay for it within a certain period of time, whether it's a year or 2 years, then the Scottish Government would have the power to repossess that land and we would be able to deal with all this fragmented ownership and all the rest of it. Believe me, I've been a conveyancing solicitor for 50 years. That was my trade. I know about the law, I know about land law and things like this, and I just wish to God we would get onto it and actually make Scotland a place that we can be proud of, where everyone has a decent home and where people have the opportunity to thrive and our townscapes are actually made something that we can all be proud of. And we have it in our hands to do it now. So let's do it. Reject this motion because we have something better and send a signal to our government to get on with it. Because even the civil servants, the highest civil servant in the land that deals with this, now agrees that we can do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. And Chris, can I invite you back to sum up, please? You've got 2 minutes, max. Max.
Well, I'll dispense with most of these comments then. Yeah, this is very much what I expected, that there was going to be a remit back, there was going to be a direct negative, and that much of the content would be, unfortunately, based on misapprehensions of what the text actually says and what it actually means. So, for instance, there's an exclusion for crofting. Crofting is not captured by this. This isn't targeted at small landowners. Yes, small landowners will pay a nominal amount, a trivial amount. It's targeted at large landowners who will not pay trivial amounts. There's a number of issues in the amendment. So, removing the text ultimate beneficial owners. Now, ultimate beneficial owners is a well understood legal phrase that is targeted at ensuring that all of those very small number of people that own enormous tracts of Scotland and conceal their ownership through offshore trust funds and Cayman Island fronts are forced to register the land in their own name or, as Graham was pointed out, lose it. Have the people take it back. Diversified as well. Now, I appreciate that diversification is a big issue for farmers and crofters, and, you know, we've all watched Clarkson's farm. You know, we know the issues. That's why agriculture is excluded. But, you know, if you're diversifying a farm and you've actually used more than an acre of your farm to diversify your farm, if you can't afford £2 a month off the business that you're doing on that diversified land, you're not really diversified. You're mad. You're doing something wrong there. But putting diversification in there puts in a loophole that allows grouse moors and giant landowners to chuck a couple of sheep on a piece of land and call it farmland and escape the tax. I appreciate the sentiment, but I think the amendment will be a mistake. Please pass the resolution unamended. Thank you very much.
Okay, delegates, we now move to voting, and we will first up vote on the amendment. Can I invite those who wish to vote for the amendment to raise their cards now, and to do so visibly? Hands down. Can I now ask those who wish to vote against the amendment to raise their hands? That's clear. Hands down. Conference, that's clear. The amendment falls. We now move to the remit back. Can I ask those who wish to vote for the remit back to raise their hands now? Hands down. And can I ask those who wish to vote against the remit back to raise their hands now? Okay. Hands down, Conference. That's clear. The remit back fails. We now move to the direct negative. For those who wish to vote for the direct negative, please raise your hands now. Hands down, please. And for those who wish to vote against the direct negative, please raise your hands. Hands down, Conference. That's very clear that the direct negative fails. We now move on to the resolution, unamended. For those who wish to vote in favour of the resolution, please raise your hands now. Hands down. And those who wish to vote against the resolution, please raise your hands now. Okay, hands down. That's pretty clear. The resolution is passed by conference. Thank you. Right. Right, colleagues, with your indulgence, we are moving swiftly on. Can I invite the proposer, Laura Mitchell, who is going to propose resolution number 11. And Laura is from the Murray Constituency Association. So welcome, Laura.
Thank you, Conference. I'm not actually the author of this resolution, but I didn't hesitate when I was asked to move it on behalf of my branch today. There are few issues that matter more to me than the rights of every woman to have autonomy over her own body. It's a right that must be protected, enshrined and defended by the full weight of our nation's laws. It's not just a matter of policy, Conference, it's one of principle, of justice and of basic human rights. For generations, women have fought tirelessly for the right to make decisions about our own bodies, our own lives. So let me say loudly to the tiny number gathered outside our hall today, not your body, not your choice, we are not going back. Conference, abortion isn't only a healthcare issue, it's one that reflects our broader struggle for equality. And across the world, we've witnessed the tragic consequences of women being denied this right. Women forced underground, seeking dangerous and often deadly alternatives. On International Women's Day this year, France became the first country in the world to explicitly include the right to abortion in its constitution, recognising that these hard-won rights cannot be taken for granted and providing a powerful shield against any attempts to roll them back. It fills me with fear and fury, delegates, that we live in a world where our reproductive rights are under attack. Around the world, we're witnessing a worrying rise in populism and regressive policies that seek to undermine the rights of women and marginalised communities. With independence, Scotland will have the chance to build a new and modern nation state built on our progressive values. And as we build our better nation, the foundation should be built on a constitution that enshrines the rights of all of Scotland's citizens. Our constitution will be more than just a piece of paper. It will be the highest expression of our nation's values and our aspirations, the bedrock upon which our laws and our institutions are built. By placing the right to abortion within our constitution, we ensure it is a right that cannot easily be stripped away. We protect it from the whims of politicians, from changing tides of public opinion, and from the potential influence of outside forces. In doing so, we provide women with the security that they deserve, the knowledge that our rights are not up for debate, our autonomy is guaranteed. It's about building a future where future generations of women grow up knowing that their bodies are their own and their choices will be respected. Enshrining the right to abortion in our constitution is not just the right thing to do, it's what we must do. It's a declaration that Scotland stands for equality, for justice and for freedom for all our people. Independence is not only about reclaiming political power from Westminster, though that is essential, delegates. It's also about defining who we are and what we stand for as a country. Conference backing this resolution today will send a clear message that our party will always defend and fight for abortion rights. And though not mentioned in this resolution, and so not what we're voting on today, I do think it's important to say that support for this motion doesn't mean we should wait for independence to further protect and enhance the rights of women in Scotland to access abortion. There is more we can do now, and I hope to see the Scottish Government take action to recommit to the decriminalisation of abortion in Scotland, to work to ensure that all women can access the services they need here in Scotland, and to ensure the enforcement of the recent buffer zone laws that were passed after the excellent campaign by Back Off Scotland. Conference, this resolution is about the kind of country we want to create and how we want to use the powers of independence. So let's make it clear today that with independence there will be no rolling back of our rights, that a woman's body belongs to her and her alone. I believe in independence because I believe in our vision for a Scotland built on equality, compassion and social justice, a Scotland that will resolutely defend the rights of all of her people, a Scotland we can be proud of. Conference, we must never go back. Please back the resolution.
Thank you, Laura. Now I have a request to speak for the resolution from Kim Marshall. Kim wishes to speak in favour of the resolution. Kim, will you also second the amendment? I don't have a card in for you. Okay. So I don't have it in front of me. Please accept my apologies. No, I'm certainly not, sir. I'm just trying to take some advice to ensure that we adhere to our own rules. Yeah. Conference is content to let. Sorry, I don't know your name. If conference is content to let Sani Donald speak without a card being put in, that's fine. No problem.
Thank you for that. Conference, my body has not been my own for as long as I remember. My body was not mine as a child when men catcalled me walking home from school. My body is not mine when I go into a bar and I get groped. And if I was a woman living in America right now and needed access to an abortion, my body would not be mine. Conference, women's healthcare should not be up for debate. Our access to healthcare should not be a controversial issue. And yet it does seem to be a debate. It does create controversy. Young girls grow up in a world where objectification of our bodies is a given. It's a given that we decide by committee on the individual choices that an individual can make, despite the fact that we have no idea about the circumstances that led that woman to make that choice. Let me tell you, quite frankly, I've had enough. What I do with my body is nobody's business but my own. What any woman in the world does with their body should be nobody's business but their own. And yet here we are, once again, discussing what women should or should not be able to do with the bodies that have been objectified since they were children. Discussing if our rights should remain our rights. Walking into conference past a group of protesters who care more about an unborn life than the woman who is alive and faced with the traumatic choice that they have. So until we reach the day that we stand here discussing men's bodies and their access to healthcare, I will continue to stand up for women. I will continue to stand up for women and for what is right and fair. I ask you to support this resolution because whether you know it or not, someone in your life has had an abortion, as is their right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sally. Thank you, Sally, and apologies to conference for the kerfuffle at the start of that. We are moving on. So we have a card for the remit back from Stephanie Melnick. Is there, before I ask Stephanie up to speak, can I check whether there is a seconder for the remit back? There's a gentleman at the back there. Stephanie, would you like to make your way to the stage, and if we can get the gentleman's details? Thank you, Stephanie.
Good afternoon, conference. Those of you who know me are probably surprised to see me remitting this back, but I'm asking you to remit this back on the basis of how constitutions ought to work. Rights enshrined in a constitution are usually and ought to be the fundamental principal rights on which more specific laws and policies can later be enacted. Abortion is a specific application of both bodily autonomy and healthcare. Therefore, a more appropriate constitutional right would be the right to bodily autonomy and the right to healthcare. Now, conference, when I say I want to remit back, I do mean remit back, to return the principles of this resolution to its authors, for them to rewrite and bring back to a future conference. I would like to see a resolution at a future conference calling for the right to bodily autonomy to be enshrined in Scotland's future constitution. I believe that is a much more constitutionally appropriate right, which would still achieve the principles set out in this resolution. While I am aware that France has the specific right to abortion in their constitution, I believe this is an outlier in general constitutional practice. When we achieve independence, it's important that we have a robust constitution which encompasses the basic rights on which specific policy can thus be developed and which the wider international community will support. So, conference, I urge you to support the remit back, and if it passes, I urge the authors to consider bringing back a new resolution on the right to bodily autonomy at a future date. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, and we have a request to move the direct negative, and can I invite Peter Grant to the stage, please? You have 5 minutes, Peter.
Thank you, Conference. I appreciate that most of you are not going to agree with what I have to say, but I hope this will always be a party that allows dissenting views to be heard respectfully and, if necessary, voted down. This party's got a long and proud tradition of recognising that there are certain issues on which people who are 100% committed to independence, utterly founded in the social value of our party, can look at an issue in absolute sincerity, with absolute integrity, and in all conscience, come to very opposing views. We've always seen it as an asset in this party that that is accepted. We have a long, long tradition that we don't whip our elected representatives on matters of conscience. We don't adopt policy positions which effectively say that one person's conscientious belief is more worthy or more sincere than another's. We welcome the fact that in the broad campaign that is the independence campaign, there are matters in which we can passionately disagree and debate respectfully. I think, incidentally, it was absolutely correct that the second speaker was given the chance to speak, because it would not have served anyone's purpose if this debate had not been allowed to happen. But please, delegates, think very carefully indeed before we abandon that principle that this party is a party where people with different views of conscience are allowed to hold them and to express them freely and respectfully. Please also take time to think about the actual difference this resolution is going to have. I don't think it will make a difference one way or another to what the abortion laws are in Scotland after independence. But no Scottish constitution is worth anything until enough people have voted for it. And there is a minority, yes, a minority, but there is a minority of independent supporters who will find it extremely difficult to vote for the Constitution if it includes this wording. How small is that minority? Nobody knows. But as we spend this weekend reflecting on the massive difference that is made to our country and to our party of a 3% swing in the electorate in July, as we remember the gut-wrenching reality of what a 5.5% swing could have meant in September 2014, please do not make the mistake of thinking that there is a single SNP supporter, a single independent supporter, that we can afford to give any reason whatsoever to vote against our constitution when it comes. We need to build a sustained majority for independence. Our aim should be that when we present our constitution to the people of Scotland, there is nothing in it, absolutely nothing, that could make a single independent supporter hesitate for a single minute before they vote for it. We can't build a sustained majority if we're prepared to alienate minorities. Conference, I accept in this issue I am in the minority. I'm in the majority of people that want independence. At the moment, I'm in the minority that are prepared to vote for it now. You won't alienate me by passing this resolution. I'll vote for independence with or without this resolution. You have my word on that. If one person is deterred from voting for our constitution on the basis of this resolution, that one person could make all the difference. Please, I fully accept the insincerity of those that have spoken. I don't have an issue with that at all. How could I? They've spoken from conscience, and I respect that. But please, don't put anything into the constitution of an independent Scotland that will make that constitution irrelevant because we deter supporters of independence from voting for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And can I now call Kim Marshall to speak for the resolution? And Kim will be followed by Aaron Taylor, who wishes to speak against the resolution. Kim, if you would like to make your way to the podium. Thank you. Thank you, Kim.
Just before I start, to say thank you to everybody who's given me so much support this week. If you know, you know. I visited the US in 2014 and had conversations with two good friends, one a registered Republican, one a somewhat lukewarm Democrat, and asked them why abortion was going to be such a critical issue in the next election in the US, when it's been settled law in the UK for, at that time, nearly half a century, and was quietly smug that we had taken such a grown-up attitude towards this for most of my life. I was back in the US in 2016 after Brexit, and I talked to the same people, one slightly less dedicated Republican and one registered Democrat. Because I said to them, again, what happens now if Trump wins? What becomes of Roe and Wade? And they both said, we'll be fine. We still have the Supreme Court. That went well. We've seen the tactics of the Republican right, the evangelicals, with the advent of protests, not just outside hospitals, but running the gauntlet coming into conference this morning. And as you may expect, I had a few words to say to them. Very choice ones. We have seen how they have tried to harass and intimidate women, in increasingly intrusive ways, and it is to the credit of our Scottish Parliament that we have passed that buffer zone legislation. To prevent these bigots in their attempts to impose their values on others. I am all for debate, but you have to respect other people's choices, but don't do that by forcing your choice on somebody else. Unacceptable as their behaviour has been, it's noting that the attacks on staff and premises in the US has been so much worse. And certainly I noticed as a candidate in the election, I was getting a lot of abuse from people who held those sort of views. Because there seems to be an assumption by those on the religious right that abortion is something that women enter into lightly, frivolously even. Because women are in general, quotes, a bunch of godless sluts who need a bit of regulation from men in how they conduct themselves. As one of those godless sluts myself, who was told in love by my darling mother-in-law that my successive miscarriages were God's judgment for the abortion. Oh yeah, this is why we moved to Scotland, 350 miles between me and her. I can tell you it's very definitely not. And what I want to say, some have already said, but certainly we do not want to be under the regime of people like the Family Party, the Kinderküche kitchen people. Yeah, I just want to finish one last sentence in relation particularly to the previous speaker. 10 seconds. Coach Wolfs said this at the Democrat conference. Even if we wouldn't make the same choice ourselves, there's a golden rule. Mind your own damn business. Conference, support the resolution.
Conference, I've been advised that Aaron Taylor has withdrawn his request to speak, and we're moving on to summing up. Can I ask Stephanie, who's going to sum up for the remit back, if she wishes to exercise her right to 2 minutes? Okay, thank you, Stephanie. And Peter, would you wish to exercise your right to sum up for the direct negative? If you make your way to the podium, please.
Thanks, Angela. Just to be absolutely clear, I deplore some of the tactics that have been used by some of those outside. I deplore some of the bullying and harassment that's going on outside clinics and other abortion advice centres. I've had a very public Twitter spat with my own church's press office over these exact matters. Yes, I'm a person of religious belief. I am certainly not on the religious right. And if you want to go back and check my speaking and voting record, right back to the days of Section 28, you'll see that. That is not where I'm coming from. I wish sometimes that there weren't people who've come from a completely different political set of values from me who end up with superficially the same views as me on this issue. Believe me, I'm not coming from a position of imposing anything on anyone. I'm coming from a position, first of all, of believing that there are two lives involved. I accept that some people don't accept that. But this motion is not about abortion. This motion is about a constitution for our independent Scotland. And I don't want to see anything put in that constitution that jeopardises the possibility of the constitution becoming the constitution of a real independent Scotland rather than just a theoretical one. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And can I invite Laura back to sum up for the resolution?
Delegates, I'm going to keep this very short. I absolutely respect everyone's views, and I recognise that people hold different views on abortion, but it's quite simple for me. If you don't believe in abortion, then don't have one. And women are over 50% of the population. In an independent Scotland, surely we are going to advocate for a country that recognises me and you as full human beings with autonomy over what we do with our lives, and we're not going to force people to make difficult choices that they shouldn't have to make. So I hope you'll back the resolution. please do.
Thank you, Laura, and to everyone who's contributed in this debate. It is, of course, it goes without saying, a difficult matter for many people. We are now moving to the voting. Can I ask those who are in favour of the remit back to raise their cards? That's if you wish to vote for the remit back. Raise your hands now. Okay, put your hands down, please. If you're against the remit back, please raise your hands. Okay, conference, hands down, please. It's clear that the remit back falls. If you are in favour of, if you wish to vote for the direct negative, please raise your cards now. Hands down, please. And for those who wish to vote against the direct negative, please raise your cards. Hands down. That's very clear, conference, that the direct negative fails. Can I ask, conference, for those who wish to vote for the resolution to raise your hands now? Okay, hands down, please. And for those who wish to vote against the resolution, raise your hands and cards now. Okay. Thank you very much, conference. That's very clear that the resolution is passed. Conference, for those who are leaving, do so quietly, but I would say that we have one resolution on an informed consent model for adult transition care that we have not succeeded in getting to that point on the agenda. We have two options. We can either carry forward that resolution to National Council in December, or there is the option of suspending standing orders, although I am seeing a number of people leaving the hall at this moment. Could I test with those who are remaining whether they would be content for this resolution, with some regret and sadness, that it goes to the National Council in December? No? Right. Yeah. I am receiving advice that we doubt that we are quorate because people are leaving. Quorate would be around 400. There is not 400 people in this hall, I don't think, colleagues. Hmm? Do you wish to raise a point of order as opposed to shout at me? If you wish to raise a point of order, madam, I will get the mic to you and you will be afforded that right, which is your right to speak, but we will do it, Sarah, with the point of order. Thank you. Please give Sarah the microphone. Sarah.
This was agreed by the conferences committee for this. We have agreed to allow one equalities motions onto this. Please let this occur right here. Like literally, there is someone that we have persuaded to actually bring their lived experience here for the first time in conference. If this is a party of progressiveness and equal rights, please let this be debated here today.
Sarah, can I say that I absolutely appreciate and hear your concerns. I hear your concerns very loudly indeed. The Conferences Committee did, of course, agree the agenda. The Conferences Committee also agreed the time limit cut-off for the agenda, which we have already surpassed. I am beholden to members of the audience. I am very sorry that many people, perhaps through other engagements, have now left the hall, but we are not quorate. There is not 400 people in this. quorum count if people would be content with that. Oh, point of order, sir. Okay.
I hope this counts as a point of order. If it doesn't, my apologies. It seems to me that there's a will with those who are left in the room to have the debate. Is it possible to have the debate without a vote, given that we are not quorate?
Okay, I will come back to you on that very point, sir. And there's a lady over here that a point of order. Is that a no?
I also don't know if this is a point of order, but I would like to say that the greatest difficulties we had with this whole issue lost us so many people. We need to look at it. We need to look at it, folks, because it's central to people's feelings.
Forgive me. I'm sorry. That is not a point of order. That's a debating point. But thank you anyway. Do we have point of order?
Hi there. My name is Ailey McIntosh. I'm a 26-year-old transgender woman, and I was chosen to second this motion today. I find it abhorrent in the extreme that our party has allowed itself to be corrupted by culture war issues, that we cannot have a proper debate on my rights.
Sorry, that is not a point of order. Forgive me, that's not a point of order either.
My apologies.
Yes,
but
okay.
It had to be
Listen, are these genuinely about points of order? You know, because unless this hall is quorum, we have some difficulty in proceeding with a debate when conference is not quorum. And in answer to the gentleman's point earlier, we can't have a debate without a vote, sir. Point of order, where are we?
Yeah. Would it be possible to move this debate to the afternoon session alongside topical and emergencies instead of delaying to National Council?
So the difficulty here is, and forgive me if you think this is a somewhat circular argument or discussion, if we are not quorate, we can't therefore take decisions on this afternoon's business. Yes?
Will I be able to raise a point of order at the start of that session to ask for this to be debated?
Yes. Okay, conference, I'm seeking your indulgence, but are we able to move on from points of order, bearing in mind there will be a point of order in the next session? Yes, okay, well let's do that then. Enjoy your lunch, enjoy your respite, and we'll see you all back here sharp, please.